So we will be doing now practical hands-on with the larger model PAM, which is in basic concepts very similar to what we have seen before so far. Okay, so we understand the concepts, but the codes and the model, and it has more equations and more identities and more physical instruments, and it is like somewhat complicated, but conceptually very similar to what we had so far. Okay. In addition, it is open, so there is a real exchange rate. There are some imports, exports. Okay, and very simplistic, like a foreign demand. So please go to the igpmn.org workshops, materials, and this Tuesday, and there is afternoon 1 only for today. And if you click on it, there should be the zip. Okay, unzip it somewhere on your computer. Unzip it to CCC. Okay, unzip it to CCC on your computer. Yeah. Then you have to, in MATLAB, because the CCC is the collection of the codes and model codes and so on, and it has again the utilities which can be somewhat little different from what we used yesterday, and the reporting is yesterday. So we will need the access to these utilities. So you need add path CCC /model codes closed /utils. Okay, and then in MATLAB you navigate to this directory CCC model codes closed, and then you just run d1 underscore, and there is something calibrate, whatever, run calibration, d1 underscore run calibration, I think, and this is a d1 underscore run stylized shocks or something. Okay, so just try to run it. Yeah. If you have an error, here is Sergey and Mirek, and they will help you. Yeah. And tell me when you are done. Just quickly go through what is through this model and explain you the a little bit structure, and but not much, because it is as I said, it's conceptually very similar to what we had so far.
Variable trend is not stationary.
I think everyone will have the error that T-trend is not stationary, variable T-trend. When reporting, when creating steady state report.
Yes.
So we need to always keep the different of those. Different is
Working, or you are getting the same error, or what? I just don't understand why it's error. The same?
yeah,
The same. No, then you have to, they are connected. You cannot try D1, D2 after D1, right? So it's somewhere. Is yours? Is it yours?
This is mine.
Is it yours? Okay. You know, because I like touching things and I just click it. Okay, so we will fix it. The second, is it working?
Yeah. For you to remove those STD from there as well.
Okay, so please, I don't know why, but yeah, I don't know why, but what happens is that this report access doesn't work. So so you have to, I can see
The same problem like me and Alan are using old iris, this 2015 generated works. So like
yeah, so the easiest way, I'm sorry for that, D1 run calibration, if you open D1 run calibration, 46, 47, there is this report AS, just please comment it out, both lines, 47, 48. Do you have it? I'm just sorry about it, I don't understand why. D1 run calibration. So it is in D1 run calibration, just comment out these two lines. Yeah. Okay, and then let's run the TD2. Now, is it running for you, Alan?
It is still running.
It is still running. Okay, so
E2.
yeah, perfect. So so now, if your computer is working, please, I will just ask for your attention, and I will just quickly take you through the model file, and the model. So you probably cannot see me, so. Okay, so again, it is in IDs. The variable names are now prefixed with US. Okay, because this is the US economy against the rest of the world. So the size of the US economy in the about 25%. So the next 75% is just the rest of the model, which is described in very few equations here. I will show you quickly. The structure of the file is that we have these price settings. So this is basically these two Phillips curves. Okay, it is the Phillips curve for the. It is the Phillips curve for the core. So the CPI-X means core. And then we have the Phillips curve for the wage inflation. So here is the wage inflation Phillips curve. You can see that it is very similar to what we had. We have this alpha FE, this is bar, FE like a full employment, this is bar, this is steady state, and this is the time variable alpha. Okay? So this is the wage Phillips curve. And then we have this OLG consumption, and conceptually it is the same. So we have variable called MPC, marginal propensity to consume. Yeah, is inverse of the inverse of marginal propensity to consume. Here is the USJ, this is the stochastic price in kernel. Yeah, calculated in a very similar way. Look, here is the power of 1 over US sigma, 1 plus US RC. RC is the real interest rate, and it is net. Okay, in the previous algebra, the interest rates were gross, so all interest rates here are net. So we need to add 1 plus the net interest rate. Yeah, here is the equation for the inverse of the marginal propensity to consume. So you can see this 1 plus tax rate on the consumption, probability of survival, USJ over real interest rate times US CP MPC inverse T plus 1. Okay, plus some details. I don't want to go through all the details. I just want to show you that the model is conceptually very similar. Other valve here. So this is the accumulation of the other valve. We have the transfers minus lump sum taxes. Okay. We have the human valve, and you can see that it is the disposable income. No, this is the labor. This is labor income minus the tax, minus the labor tax revenues. Yeah. And here again we have the probability of survival, US high. This is this diminishing lifetime productivity. Yeah. Then we have the financial wealth. Okay, it consists here from the domestic bonds, USBN. These are domestic bonds. Then the foreign, then the foreign net foreign assets, NFA. Okay. Yeah, US bonds and net foreign assets. And then we have the total wealth, which is the human wealth, other wealth, and financial wealth. Okay, this is exactly the same. as you had before, and then the consumption equation is here saying that the consumption of OLG, now we have these overlapping generations, so these are the savers, okay? This is what I called savers before. OLG is equal marginal propensity to consume times the valve. Yeah? And then we have the liquidity or hand to mouth, so here it is called LIQ, like a liquidity constraint. The better way is to call them hand to mouth households. Yeah, and they have just a consumption. The variable C liq R is their real consumption, and this consumption is just the disposable income. Yeah, so we should see that consumption here is labor share minus taxes, and this lambda is the share of the households in liquidity constrained households or the hand-to-mouth households in the whole economy. Okay, and then we have some transfers, targeted transfers, lump sum taxes. Yeah. Yeah, and some more details. And minus tax rate, consumption tax rate, right on here. So this is the disposable income of the hand to mouth, and they just consume it. Yeah. And then we have besides this. Yeah. Here is the capital valve, the capital valve calculated from using Tobin's Q. Here is the capital income, Cobb-Douglas production function. So this is the demand for the capital, right? So this is the rental rate of capital times capital must be the alpha times nominal value added. Yeah. Here is the equation saying that the Tobin's Q is basically equal to the investment deflator plus something which depends on the adjustment costs. Here is the Tobin's Q pricing equation saying that the Tobin's Q is now it's not that visible, but is the discounted sum of Tobin's Q tomorrow, or sorry, discounted sum of these incomes, and this income is after tax, rental rate, okay, and here is 1 minus delta times Tobin's Q, right? So the equations are very similar conceptually. It's the same, so you should be able, if you understood the algebra before, right, you should be able to map it out to these equations. Here is the capital accumulation equation saying that the investment is capital minus 1 minus delta capital before. Then we have some trade. Here in the PAM, here in this version of the PAM, we have only manufactured goods, but in other versions we have also oil, metals, and food, right? Oil, metals, food. So here is the demand for the exports from this US to the rest of the world. Okay, so this is just a simple how it's called. Error correction, whatever equation, right? So it basically depends on the things you would expect from steady state. Yeah. So it depends on the changes of the foreign activity. Yeah. It depends on the changes of the change of the import exports of the manufacturer depends on the change of the foreign activity. Depends on the RCI is a real competitive index. Competitiveness index, okay, so it is like a some measure of real exchange rate, but in this two-country model, it is basically equal to real exchange rate. Yeah, and we have the shock here. And the same, for the same, we have the same equation or similar equation for the demand for manufactured goods imports. Yeah. Here is the domestic activity index. Okay, which is something like a weighted average of consumption, investment, government consumption, government investment, yeah, and exports. So it is just a measure, yeah, how to construct some like some summarizing activity index, which goes then to these demand functions. Aggregate demand. So here is the expenditure side of the GDP. Yeah, here it is the expenditure side of the GDP. So you can see that the GDP is consumption, investment, government absorption of funds, government. Yeah, government has now one complication is that there are two fiscal rules, and we can choose either one, yeah, one of these two, and the one is expressed in terms of total deficit. So here is the fiscal rule in terms of total deficit, yeah, and we can have a rule expressed in terms of the primary balance, yeah. So before we had a rule expressed in the total deficits, but here we have two choices: either it is primary balance or the total balance. Yeah. And the rule consists of the following. So here is the switch. So this XXG dev. If it is 1, if it is 0, then we use this deficit rule. Okay. So this is we use the deficit rule. If it is 1, that means that we are saying that deficit is the primary balance plus interest rate cost minus primary balance plus interest rate cost. So we are just employing this identity if it is 0. Okay. If it is 1, if it is 0, if this is 0, so this is 1, then we have the deficit goes to the deficit target. Yeah, so this is like an underlying deficit, and now it deviates from the target, this underlying deficit target, by the response to the output gap. So here, this complicated thing is output gap. So we have GDP x agricultural, so it is x agricultural output gap, okay, and this is x agricultural potential. Yeah, X agricultural potential. So this is basically X agricultural output gap, and this is the effect of the automatic stabilizer. Yeah. So in the output gap, if the economy is booming, the fiscal policy is making the expenditure plans, but they are based on the expectations of the tax revenues made before this open output gap. So the government is basically surprised, right, by extra tax revenues, and that's why the deficit goes down, right? So if the positive output gap, this automatic stabilizer effect is making the deficit in terms of GDP, it's making the deficit to go down. And okay, so here is the nominal GDP. Yeah? So if we just put this back here, we are talking about the deficit to GDP ratio. Okay, so this is how the deficit to GDP ratio changes because of the automatic stabilizer effect to 1% output gap. And here we have another variable or another parameter which is US then that, and this is a coefficient we didn't have before, but we can have it, right? And it is basically how the deficit reacts on the deviation of the actual debt to GDP target, actual debt to GDP to the target debt to GDP. So B star is the target debt to GDP ratio. Okay. Of course, because this GDEF tar is tied to this target. Yeah, these are tied by the identity, and we had this identity before. Of course, even without that, even if this is 0, the debt will be automatically going here because the actual deficit ratio will be automatically approaching this. Yeah, but we can make it faster. Yeah, and we can make it faster by putting something positive here. Do you understand? Or this is just a policy, fiscal policy rule. Yeah, we are just reacting on the deviation from the target in 2 ways. Because this GDEF tar is connected with this government debt target GDP ratio, and the second is this mechanism which makes it faster if you want. If you just put something positive, it will go faster. Yeah. And then this primary surplus rule is exactly the same in the structure. Yeah. It is if it is switched on, switched off. If this is switched off, then we have basically saying that the primary deficit is equal, primary surplus is equal tax revenues minus expenditures plus interest rate costs. Yeah, and if it is switched on, then we are basically saying exactly the same. We have the primary surplus target, then we have the automatic stabilizer effect. Okay, so if we have larger agricultural output gap, then we have we are likely to have higher surplus. And here again, US then that means that we are reacting with this primary surplus faster on the deviations from the actual debt of the target debt. Yeah, then it will be implied by this primary surplus target. Okay, so these are 2 fiscal rules, and we just choose one of them and use, right? I have to admit I never used this second one, or maybe I used it. I didn't know that, right? So okay, so we just choose one, and it's not a big deal. And here is the relationship between the promised relationship between the deficit target and the debt target. Yeah, so this is the relationship I already showed you in the algebra before. So this is conceptually exactly the same, and here is the relationship for the primary surplus. Yeah, the primary surplus is the deficit target plus some long-run interest rate costs. Yeah, interest rate costs which depend on the real interest rate plus inflation target and are applied on the debt level, right? So this is these are basically these 2 relationships which are useful to define this variable here and this variable here. Yeah? And everything depends on everything actually is driven by, in the long run, is driven by the debt to GDP ratio target. Okay, and this debt to GDP ratio target is just a random walk as before. It is just a random walk. Yeah. So we have it random walk B star is equal B star T minus 1 plus the innovation. Okay. Then we have some import tariff revenue. So the model has a possibility to collect the import taxes on the imports. Yeah. Then we have the total tax revenues here. They consist of the consumption, capital, labor, lump sum, and the tariffs on the imports. Okay, these are the tax revenues. The tax revenues on consumption is the tax rate times the nominal consumption, right? Tax revenues on capital is the tax rate. Now it is the rental rate of capital applied on the capital before. In this model, we extend the replacement for the rusting, right? So whatever they just don't pay taxes on the expenditures for the depreciation, right? Here is the tax revenues from the labor, so it is the tax rate times the labor share or labor income, total labor income. And now we have the fiscal rules, okay? And they are complicated in the way that they go for the instruments, okay? And basically for each instrument we have, well, I had a presentation about it, so I will just pick up the slide here. Okay, so this slide is describing first that we have two fiscal rules in terms of government deficit and primary surplus. Okay, so we covered this, and you can shut it off or switch it on. And then we have a number of instruments on the revenue and expenditure side. For each instrument, we have two switches, primary and secondary. Instrument does. Okay. So we have these three possibilities. If the secondary switch is 0, then and the primary switch is 1, then the instrument is used to clear the chosen fiscal rule. So we choose the fiscal rule, and if this instrument is labor tax, it is the same logic as before, right? This labor tax will be such to meet the fiscal rule, to meet the deficit defined by the fiscal rule. Okay. Of course, you can shock the fiscal rule, right? There are shocks. You can deviate from that fiscal rule by shocking the fiscal rule directly, right? But the labor tax, if it is chosen as an instrument, it will be will be just clearing with the labor tax revenues, is clearing the fiscal rule. Yeah. So it is done if you make a secondary switch 0 and the primary switch 1. Yeah. And if the secondary is switch 0 and the primary switch is 0, then the instrument stays constant. Okay, so it is not changed, it stays constant. And the second possibility is, if the secondary switch is 1, then the instrument is used to maintain corresponding expenditure or revenue share to GDP constant. Okay, so there are three possibilities. We had before only one, yeah, only two. Either the instrument was used to clear the deficit or to clear the fiscal rule, or it was constant, and in terms of tax rates, it was constant tax rate. In terms of, I don't know, government consumption, it was the constant GDP share. Yeah. Now here in this model, it is more it is finer. The choice is finer because we either have the instrument can be constant or the instrument can be used to make the corresponding revenue share to GDP constant. For example, labor tax, okay, will be such that the labor tax revenues to GDP are constant. Yeah. Yeah.
So there may be a conflict between secondary and primary instruments. In other words, right? Correct. So the primary instrument will try to say target get to some consolidation ratio, while I will have to do it in such a way that because the secondary instrument will be keeping expenditure to GDP roughly constant all the time. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does it have solution all the time? I mean, it does.
Yeah. And it may happen that if no instrument is chosen to be primary for the fiscal rule, so it may happen that for all instruments, the secondary switch is 0 and the primary switch is 0. Yeah. Or the secondary switch, or sorry, for that all instrument, the secondary switch is 0. That means that there is like a default instrument, which is the lump sum taxes. And if this happens, then the lump sum taxes are just clearing the deficit. Yeah. These invisible lump sum taxes are clearing the deficit. If this happens, if we don't use any other explicit instrument. Yeah. Okay, do you understand? So here is it is like a logic. I know it takes a little bit of thinking to understand, but these switches are the following in the code. For example, for tau L, yeah, the secondary switch is L tags LR SW, like switch, L tags LR SW. So if it is switched on, if it is 0, and this is 1, then the tax rate is used to clear the deficit. Labor tax rate is cleared to the used deficit, right? If this is 0 and this is 0, then the tax rate stays constant. Yeah, I hope that if this is 0, yes, then the tax rate stays constant. So the tax rate was 10%, then it stays constant 10%. Okay? And if this L tax LR SW is 0, not 1, before it was 0. Before it was 0. Now, if it is 1, this L tax LR SW is 1, then regardless of this value, it doesn't matter what is the value here. If this is 1, then this is used to maintain the labor tax revenue share to GDP constant. Okay? Yeah? So it is like a finer choice, a little bit finer choice what we had before, right? You can have the instrument itself constant, or you can have basically the share of that revenue or that expenditure constant in terms of GDP. Okay, so the same, for example, is GC. This is the government consumption. Yeah. So in this case, if this is 0, and regardless this, it doesn't matter. But if this is 0, then the GC is manipulated so that the government consumption to GDP expenditure is constant. Yeah, in terms of percent of GDP. Okay. This GI is the government investment. Yeah, so now the model is a little bit more complicated because before we had only G, yeah, like absorption. Now we have a G is equal GY plus GC. GC is wasteful and GI accumulates to the public capital. Yeah? Completely crowds out. Yeah, look, I didn't look to these shocks, like to the GI shocks, very detailed, because they depend on the production function. I think that the current calibration we have, I look at it once or a few times. It doesn't it basically says that if I increase government investment, because the production function is so simple that if I increase government investment, it is actually like harmful for the economy because it crowds out the private investment, right? Yeah, but the marginal product of the government investment now in the current calibration is actually lower than the marginal product of the private investment. So we are choosing, we are substituting public investment with the private one, and the marginal product of the public one is lower. Yeah, I didn't think about the production function and what. Yeah, so it is there, we can use it, but I never. Yeah, so you have to be careful because it really depends on the production function. You know what you are implying. We have also targeted transfers. So these are the transfers to the liquidity constraint to hand to mouth. So these transfers are not enjoyed by the savers, by the OLG households. Okay, so this is the structure. This is the logic of these fiscal rules here. Yeah.
Do we have the presentation anywhere? So is it uploaded or not yet?
For this one, I'm just showing the 2 slides, just to explain the codes, right? But it's just 2 slides. But we are back to the codes. Sorry, I need to. My throat is very. And then here is the accumulation equation. I told you that I never looked at it much. Here is some. Oh, it is commented out, but it was like all subsidy. Then we have the transfer rule. We have the targeted transfer rule. Okay. We have some incentive for the government debt here. So the government debt change is the deficit, and that's it. Okay. So this is the fiscal. This is the fiscal part. Then we have these interest rates. Yeah. So there is a section for the interest rates, and there are a lot of interest rates, and it is like a basic, like some hierarchy of different interest rates, different premiums, and so on. But it is not interesting to us now. Okay. The most important thing is the monetary. This MP, monetary policy, and U means unconstrained. Okay, unconstrained because now we are imposing the 0 hour bound here. Okay, and then we have the market nominal interest rate, right, which is the monetary policy plus sovereign premium. Then we have nominal interest rate is equal to real interest rate times the inflation expectations, and so on and so on. We have some term structure as well. Yeah, we have this corporate. So the logic is similar, but this is like a more complicated. This is myself? Oh no, this is Sergey, I think. It's more complicated. And then the prices. Okay. Price is basically the equation which does something here is the price of the export manufactured price of the manufactured exports, which again depend on the price of the export. XM, I see, X manufactured. Yeah, PXM is exports manufactured. Yeah. Yep. It depends on the non-oil. This NO used to be non-oil, but we don't have oil now, so it is like a non-oil deflator. Okay, so this is like a common price level in the economy without oil. It depends on and it should depend also on the demand. Oh, this is the supply. Yeah. Yeah. Here is import price. Okay. So it depends on it is basically the function of the real exchange rate and then the export price in the rest of the world. Yeah. Plus some shocks. It's very simplified here. Yeah, now I am a little bit slower because it is now different what I used to look. So I'm just trying to map out what the yeah. And here we are all back to the familiar equation. So here is the here is GDP ex agricultural. Okay, so this is agricultural ex agricultural GDP real. It is the actual TFP. Just ignore this. This is like a commodity effect of the prices. Just ignore this. We don't have commodities. It is just constant capital. Okay, powered by alpha, labor powered by minus alpha. Okay, so this is the basic production function here. Here is the TFP. Yeah, here is the TFP level, and in the TFP level, you can see the effect of the government capital. Yeah, this is the like infrastructure stock of infrastructure. Yeah, it is in log. So here is the stock of infrastructure -1, yeah, times the alpha kg, and this comes on the top of the CTFP, which is like the underlying exogenous productivity level or the TFP level, and this is here. This is a CTFP. So this is what we have TFP. So it is the level, okay, times the growth plus times the growth times the shocks. Some shocks here. Okay, and this growth is just a run process. Yeah, it's just a run process around 1, around 0. So it is exactly what we had here because we have the level shocks and we have the growth rate shocks here. Yeah, this exogenous TFP, we have also the effect of the public capital. Yeah. Trend commodity effects, these are 0, these are, you know, constant here. Yeah. And then we have agricultural sector, but now the agricultural sector in this US model is turned to be like very small. It doesn't have any impact. So it is calibrated very small. Yeah. So we don't care about it. We just wanted to have the sector which we called agricultural, which is just depends on very volatile weather conditions, right? So doesn't need basically, it has the constant labor or something, or exogenous labor, and this productivity is basically volatile weather. So this is what we wanted to achieve. Now in this model, it still exists, but it is calibrated to be small. So here is the Okun's law. Okay, so it is the difference between the actual and Nairo. So this is Nairo, UNR, full employment. This actual Nairo is the past difference between actual Nairo plus effect of the output gap, ex agricultural output gap. Okay. Yeah, and these are some shocks. These are some accumulated shocks to TFP, but we are not using them. We are not using these. So we are just, to handle the effect that is UNRFE is basically UNRFE is dependent on some permanent TFP shocks. So yeah, here is the labor is equal minus unemployment times labor force. Yeah, this equation we had before. Is the participation. Labor force is the participation rate times population. Divided the proportion of the people on the working age. Yeah, these are equations which are actually not doing anything. These are just like a constants. They are just prepared to be used in some general cases. Anything? And then the external sector. Balance the exports, so this is real exports times the deflator minus real imports times the deflator. NFA, net foreign assets, okay, it is the current account balance, so surplus plus net foreign assets before. Then we have net foreign assets private, which is basically we track for some reason the net foreign assets accumulated by the total, not the current account surplus, but the current account surplus minus. So we distinguish between the savings of the private sector. Foreign assets private will be the only the part which is caused by the current account surplus minus the government surplus, which means plus the deficit. Yeah. Here is RCI, real commodity competitive index. It is basically the terms of trade: import price, export price minus import price. Yeah, and here is the real effective exchange rate, the identity for real effective exchange rate. So, but because we have only one country, basically the US RAR is the real exchange rate to the other countries, the rest of the world. Yeah. So. Definition of ratio, this is boring, right? This is just divided by GDP. That's it. Definition of nominal variables. Now, it is labeled EU, but it means rest of the world. So it used to be EU, we turned it to rest of the world. So here is the demand for imports. So again, this is like this is the import equation we had before, right? So this is demand for imports. It is basically it depends on the activity index in the rest of the world, right? And what else? Nothing serious. So this is only demand for imports here. And world output. This is just aggregating both countries. And here is the UIP. In the end, we have UIP. So the expected depreciation. Yeah. So US EPS plus 1 is depreciation. Yeah. It is the expected depreciation is equal the gross interest rate in the US over the gross interest rate in the rest of the world. Yeah? And that's basically everything. In a model. So it is very similar to what we had before. We just opened it a little bit with these demand for exports and demand for imports. UIP, and just exogenous process for interest rate, both exogenous process for foreign prices. Okay, and it's more complicated. Yeah. So I hope that everybody has succeeded in running this D1 and D2. Is it correct? Yeah. No. And have you raised your hand?
Not yet.
Not yet. You can raise the hand, and then a handsome guy will just jump and help you. And now I would like to turn your attention to so if you open utils, this is just for you. I do not want to go really through the details because this is one day, this is like for 2 weeks. But if you open utils, if you go to utils, in the utils you will find a code which is called US_run calibration. Okay, and let's start at line 135. 135, and this is the file which basically calibrates the model using the homotopies. Yeah. So what we do here, we are calibrating the numbers directly. Okay, so parameters directly. So for example, US real SS 7.5%. Okay, G-prod, the productivity increase, I didn't emphasize it, but there is another constant, so it is 2%. Then the beta is 1 over 1 plus 0.036, so 35. Lambda, this is the share of the liquidity constrained households or hand-to-mouth households is 40%. Okay, high is the probability of survival, so it is 93. Yeah. US sigma, so this is the inverse of internal substitution consumption is 1.5. US gamma is 0.75. Yeah, and so on. Here is the monetary policy interest rate rule. So this is the first section, and then we have in this like a tuning of the levels. We do not need to tune the levels of the prices, but it is more convenient when we check the model, you know, whether all the price indices actually can be brought to one and so on. So it's like a technical thing. The country sizes here, we calibrate the country size of US to be 25% of the whole world. So there is a variable US GDP size, okay, and we calibrate it to 25 using the deep parameter here, okay. This is basically this deep parameter basically says what is the wedge in the prices between the foreign and the domestic economy, and this wedge of the prices basically scaling the size, right, actual size in terms of when we multiply with the real exchange rate, so the actual sizes will be scaled by this deep parameter. We have inflation rates, then we have alpha, this is the capital share, 0.4. Yeah, we are here, for example, we are calibrating the probability of survival, this US prop, so that the marginal propensity to consume inverse is 12. Okay, so that means that the horizon of this consumption plans is basically 12 years. Yeah. Here we are calibrating the investment, US investment to GDP ratio to 19% using some deep parameter. Okay. Here we are calibrating exactly the depreciation delta to 10%. Here we are calibrating. This is the government consumption to GDP ratio to 11.9 using this parameter, yeah? And so on and so on. We are calibrating the trade balance to GDP ratio to minus 2.7 using some wedge in the import and export prices. So we are here calibrating the fiscal block. You know,
sometimes you put in the first. Yeah, if you stay here, you put the first name, then the number, then the other.
Yeah.
Variable.
So this, if the name is the first one, so it is endogenous variable, and that means that I am setting this endogenous variable to this number 19, okay, and I am using this parameter to explain it. Okay, so instead of setting this parameter directly, because I don't know what the value the parameter should have, I'm just setting the investment to GDP ratio, and I am just saying, please calculate this parameter, constant USC lig R, so that investment to GDP ratio is 19%. Sorry?
So it's a constraint.
Yes, so this parameter is being solved, it is being unknown, it is searched, okay, yeah, so that this variable happens to be 19. Yeah, and here if the first thing is not filled, that means that we are directly setting this parameter directly to this value. Yeah, directly.
How do you do? You have a little system of equations, and you have whatever two values, some two variables that are taken up as parameters. How do you program that?
So we have the system of, I don't know, 700 or no, here only 300 equations, okay, and 300 variables. Yeah, I don't know, 100 parameters. Yeah, so I just take the variable to be not, yeah, and by default the variables are unknown. So I just take it out from the system and make it known, and make unknown the parameter, right? And say, I know that the investment ratio is 19, and this parameter becomes unknown, and I solve it.
Yeah, what if you, I mean, now you know one for one, you want to change one value, and you know which parameter is going to adjust. What if you have like a circular thing, and you have two values that will change at the same time, and two parameters that change?
Yeah, I can do it sometime, yeah, because this is the system which does, it solves every step all the equations, right? Yeah, it is the system of 300 equations or how many. Yeah, we solve it at the same time. So basically, how it works is that here you say, this variable is unknown. This symbol is unknown. So from the point of view of the computer, these are just symbols, right? So you are saying this symbol is unknown, and it has the value of 19. Yeah? And from this time, this symbol will be unknown. And we will solve it, we will solve this step. Here it is the solve field with the homotopy steps. Because this is easy to solve, we have only one homotopy step, but sometimes only 10, 20, or whatever. But yeah, so we solve it, and here we move on. Is also changing this relationship, right? But that means that to maintain 19, we also need to be moving this one. Okay, because this relationship between this one and this one, in theory, depends on everything else, right? So we just all the time, in every step, we are solving these 300 equations together. Yeah, like concurrently. It's one system, yeah, non-linear system. Yeah, and it is sometimes difficult in the system, so that's why we do it with these homotopies, right? Okay, but this model is relatively simple, so it works quite smoothly, fast, right? But for some complicated models, when you have more countries or when you have the complicated equilibrium with the real interest rates, it is actually big, like a huge work to set up the. Yeah, it is basically difficult work to set up this program so that you start tuning. You do it. Yeah, it is like a robust to the changes. So yeah, we set up the program. It doesn't work, so we think, oh, maybe we should tune first this and this afterwards, right? So it moves us, right? And it doesn't converge, so we need to, yeah. And it is sometimes difficult to set up this for the complicated models, to set up this program so that it is robust. So somebody comes and says in the beginning something, oh, I want this, not 19, but I want this 12, yeah? And then suddenly everything else becomes very, very difficult to solve. Okay, so this is, yeah, so this program takes, to write this program takes like a days, yeah, and to make it robust, yeah, so it may happen for you that if you change something at the top, yeah, it will crash somewhere here, yeah, because the system is non-linear and yeah, and these relationships, yeah, which are so on the top, okay, are so fine, but when you move to the final steady state and calibration, right, this relationship becomes more and more difficult to solve, right, because everything depends on everything. Yeah. But this is the only way how I know about we are actually able to solve these problems, right? Yeah, do you understand? Yeah. Okay, so this is the solution of the steady state or calibration of the steady state, right? So we are calibrating the steady state, we are calibrating the debt to GDP ratio, for example, to 80%. We are calibrating here the tax revenues and so on, so on, so on, okay? Yeah, so everybody succeeded to run this, right? The D1, everybody succeeded. And now we will run D2. Oh, everybody succeeded to run D2? Yeah, so let's look at the D2. So if you open D2, and this will be our sandbox, okay? So ignore everything up to the, so you will not be changing anything up to the line 49. Yeah, so here are some settings, like some settings, okay? Just don't. And now we have a series of exercises or a series of the scenarios we produce. Yeah, each scenario ends with this function report simulation and x.publish. Yeah, report simulation and publish, and it is basically saving the PDF. So the shock F name is set up here. We'll be producing government expansion transfer debt 3-year.pdf. Okay, and we'll put it to the results. Yeah. So when you run this scenario, it will produce this PDF. Yeah. When we move on, there will be another scenario and we'll produce a different PDF. Okay. So I will just go quickly through the scenarios so you understand the logic what we are doing. I will just go quickly through the PDFs. Okay. And after the break, we can do the Trump expansion, Trump tax reform. Okay. So we have 10 minutes to the break. So I will just choose. Yeah, I will just choose which scenario. Something more complicated. I don't know. Exercise 1. Exercise 2. What is the exercise 2? Yeah. Okay. Exercise 3 is nice. Yeah. So we want to engineer the government expansion through higher tax transfers and new debt. So what happens that government issues the debt, takes money from people and gives it as transfers. Yeah. So in the non-Ricardian, in the Ricardian model, it shouldn't do anything. Yeah, because the government takes from one pocket and puts it to the same pocket, and these two pockets are exactly equivalent, right? So this should not do anything, but here it does. Yeah. So it lasts for 3 years. The debt accumulates, and we don't assume any consolidation. Debt is permanently higher. So how we are going to simulate it? So after some setting the shock title and shock F name, we want to change the parameters in the model. Okay. And this is done by this command mdin. Mdin is the model object. Mdin is the model object. So we have the copy here. MD is the serious model. We have a copy to start fresh. SV is the set values. And now the set value is the structure. And we are using the number of values. So what we are doing, we are putting this damp dead 02. I don't know now why. I don't know why. USB star. US Springs were not 3 years. So this will be permanent. This will be permanently moved. And I see. Okay. So the shock is that I am basically. Sorry. So the break was moved to 4 o'clock. Okay, so how we are going to implement it? There are thousands of ways how to implement it, okay? Thousands of ways, but yeah, you can just shock equations, or you can just put the shocks directly, or you can just tune some variables and back out the shocks. There are thousands of ways. It is not the only one how we do it, but here is the way how we can do it. We will just tune US spring sur rad. So this is the primary surplus. Just tune it, okay, in these 3 years. Yeah. We just tune it in these 3 years. And now these 3 years, it will be decreased by 1 percentage point. So here we are setting the value for the input database. Okay, so the input database is US spring sur rad for the 3 years is equal. This is the US spring sur rad in the steady state database. So this is the control. This is where we start state DSS. Okay, stage point of GDP. Yeah. Okay, so we are having the higher primary surplus deficits. Yeah. And how we are going to explain it? We are explaining it using this EUSB star, which is the random walk process, which is driving that target. Okay. So this is basically interpreting what the shock is that government is increasing the target, yeah, and this increase of the target, given this fiscal rule, is consistent with the increase of the primary surplus by 1 percentage point in 3 years. Yeah, so we are basically asking the question: what needs? How the debt target needs to be increased so that the primary surplus would increase by 1 percentage point, yeah, for 3 years. Would be a lot, okay, because normally when you shock the debt target, normally, okay, the deficit is actually converging, or the actual debt is, because the deficit, okay, because the deficit is like is following the new deficit target like gradually, right? But we can make it by using this damped debt. So if we make it faster by using this damped debt, that means that we do not need to generate extremely high shocks to the level of the debt to GDP ratio in order to explain this primary surplus declining by 1 percentage point. Okay, so but the result of this scenario would be that the debt target increases somehow. Yeah, the target increases somehow, and at the same time, primary surplus ratio increases. Primary surplus to GDP decreases by 1 percentage point of GDP. And now, so this is the setup of the shock, and now we need to change the values in the model. Yeah, these switches, these fiscal rule switches, right, to ensure that we are using the proper instrument, okay, for that. And what is written there? We want to have higher transfers, okay, and the new debt. Yeah. So these extra revenues from the debt issuance are going to be to be spent as higher transfers. So what this means is, what it means basically that we need to write these XX transfers n to 1. And yeah, this is, and this is setting that the government consumption here will be constant as in terms of GDP. So basically, it also depends where we start from, right? But I'm not sure now after this. Yeah, but basically, in order to use the transfer as the instrument, we need to set it up to 1. Okay, and then we run it. When we run it, we should find in the results this file, government expansion transfer that 3-year no consolidation. So let's open it. What is called government expansion transfer debt 3-year no consolidation. Okay, and we have, I don't know how many pages there are. We have 12 pages, yeah, of various graphs, and I will just quickly go through them. What time is it now?
15 minutes to 4.
Yeah. Okay, so you can see, so let's check what we did. So we should see the transfers increasing, right? So we should see the transfer to GDP. Transfer to GDP is increased here, okay, and then gradually it goes down, but not to 0 because this deficit is not consolidated. Government deficit to GDP, you can see that it goes 1 for 3 years. It is little higher afterwards because this is not the primary surplus, this is the total. The primary balance, this is not a primary deficit, this is total deficit, right? So in this second and third year, it also includes the interest rate costs which are applied on the already increased debt. Yeah. So if we had if there was a primary balance or primary deficit, it would be fixed at 1. Okay, and the public debt increases. Yeah, and in these 3 years, we have this series of these level shocks. The series of the level shocks to the public debt target, which basically raise the target by 7 percentage points, right? It is like about 7 or 7.5 or something like that, right? So this 3% of the primary surplus in 3 years, 1, 1, 1, and with this debt target increasing in the long run by 7 percentage points. Yeah, so this is more or less, yeah, I just engineered it, right? I just was trying to engineer it so that the government deficit goes up, yeah, in the first 3 years, and then consolidates little, but because we want higher debt, this is the government policy, is that the debt is going to be permanently higher, then it stabilizes at some lower level, like less than 1/2, okay, and it is forever there. Yeah. Okay, and this deficit is spent for the transfers. Okay, and what is the impact on the economy? So, on impact of this shock, output gap opens. So the GDP gap goes by 0.15%. 0.15%, okay? And then it goes back because of the monetary policy, it needs to bring inflation back, right? So the interest rate, this is the nominal interest rate, it goes by 20 basis points, right? And then goes back to 1 year, the interest rate is here. This is the 10-year bond, okay? The 10-year nominal interest rate goes by 10 basis points. Yeah. The real exchange rate appreciates, so in this model, up means appreciation. The real exchange rate appreciates by 3%, okay, and stays appreciated forever. Yeah, a little bit. Okay, what else? The real consumption of households, so you can see that the total the total is blue one, okay, so it increases immediately, right, but mainly because of the liquidity, okay. These savers will save it, okay, partly will save it, but they will not save more, okay, they are not going to save for liquidity, so the consumption is not going down, so the overall consumption increases, you know, and they invest, okay, so they consume and they invest. Real exchange rate appreciates and the real interest rate goes increases. So this is nice demand shock. Real exchange rate appreciates, real interest rate increases, investment increases, and the consumption increases as well. Yeah. Yeah, imports increase, exports gradually decrease because this is crowded out, right? There is a crowding out of the capital investment solution. Capital stock is higher. Okay, so now we will go to the last scenario. So if you navigate the exercise, whatever, exercise 7, and this is the Trump tax reform. Yeah. Are you there with me? Yeah. And so what the tax reform is, based on what I read, they expect 1.5 trillion USD over 10 years. Okay, the current GDP is 18 trillion, right? Yeah. So basically, it is 0.75% of GDP or even more. So 0.70 or 3. Yeah, so it is less than 1% of GDP every year, and they estimate that the 1/3 of this effect is going to increase the capital income tax revenues, yeah, or sorry, decrease, yeah. It's the net effect of this, okay, is going to decrease the capital income tax revenues, and the 2/3 of it are going to decrease the labor income tax revenues, or transfers. But the transfers are labor income in this model are very similar, so we just don't distinguish between them. And how we are going to do that? Yeah. So, and it is upon you. I don't know. It is exercise left for the rest of the afternoon. We can discuss, right? And we can share the results and whatever. Okay. But there are two questions. Okay, there are two questions when we are thinking about this scenario. So how we are going to implement it in terms of change of the tax revenues. Yeah. So here I took just the simplest case. How can I do that? I am just saying it is 1.5 trillion. I believe that. Yeah. And the current GDP is 18 trillion. So I will just say, and it is in the current prices, okay? So it is the current US dollars. Yeah. But the economy is growing. Okay. So if I just decide, this is one part of the answer, I will just decide that it is even. It is even in current dollars. Okay? It is even in current dollars. So when I am going to tune it, the variables are actually each variable, because it is also detrended with respect to the deterministic trend. Yeah. So I am just going to use the steady state nominal growth rate. So this is what is highlighted. I get the value from the US GLSS, yeah, times US inflation. Yeah, so this is the gross nominal growth rate. And I will just take the number. The number is what? The number is 0.15, because we are 10 years, okay? So this is like a 1.5 trillion divided by 10, yeah? So I am asking what is the effect. I'm just dividing this effect like evenly to the years, yeah? So in 1 year, it would be 0.15 divided by 18, correct? Yeah? This is the percent, this is fraction of GDP. And I will just apply it on the GDP in the first period. Yeah? So this is basically that period money, yeah? That period money addition to the, or change in the tax revenues, yeah? And then I take this DNY, this is the growth rate, and I power it to -1 through 10. So that is like a cumulative product of the inverse of the growth rate. Yeah. I just multiply this number by this, right? So it is in the relative to this potential, or to this potential line, right? Which increases by the nominal growth rates, right? So it is relative to the nominal growth rate line. Yeah. So I just make the numbers relative to this nominal growth rate balance growth path. Yeah. Nominal balance growth path of GDP. Yeah. So I just took this 1.5 trillion. It's a lot of money, by the way. and I just spread it out evenly to these periods, okay, but each period GDP, and I'm going to add it to the tax revenues or cancel from the tax revenues, right? So I need to transform it to the that value of money in that period. Yeah. Okay, so I have this TREF, like a Trump effect, TRF, Trump effect. Okay, and when I am, and now I will be tuning labor tax revenue over this, and the capital tax revenues over 10 years. Okay, and I will be just tuning it steady state. So this is the baseline tax revenues, right? And I will just subtract 2/3 for the labor tax revenues. I will just subtract 2/3 of this Trump effect. Yeah, and here I will subtract 1/3 of the Trump effect. Yeah, so I'm just planning for the lower tax revenues. Yeah. It's one way. So this is the first part of that question. Yeah. Of that, like how I'm going to basically implement these like revenues or whatever, right? There are thousands of possible answers to this question, but it depends on you, right? So it depends on you. And the second question is how we are going, yeah. And now I am basically okay. So now I want to change. Yeah, sorry. So it is still the first part of that question. The first part we have not finished the first part. And now the question, the sub-question is, these tax revenues are basically what is the tax reform? It is changing the tax rates, right? It is changing basically the tax rates. Okay, so I need to shock the tax rates. So I'm shocking them here. I'm just saying, use this shock to the tax rate, labor tax rate, to explain this variable for these 10 years. Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Use this shock to the tax rate to explain this variable over these 10 years. Yeah, and I am tuning this variable here. Okay. So what it does, it is manipulating. It is going to search these tax rates so that the tax revenues are less by this 1.5 trillion. Yeah. You understand? And the second question is, what happens to deficit? Okay, this doesn't say anything about deficit, right? They still have some. They probably have some. I don't know some. They have the. They have some instruments which basically will offset the deficit, right? Or they were still following some fiscal rule, okay? And then they have some instrument to attain the fiscal rule, yeah? So this is the second question. What happens to the deficit in this scenario? How they are going to be, if they will, in one extreme, they can just increase this tax rate. Decrease the tax rate this, and increase the tax rate, the other tax rate, right? And they do not need to have any change of the deficit, right? This is one extreme. Okay, on the other extreme, they can just say, all this impact is deficit. We are accumulating a new debt. Okay, so these are, and we don't know what they are going to do. They didn't tell us, right? Yeah, so this is the second question. Yeah? And now in this setup, we didn't say anything about the deficit. We didn't say anything about deviation from the fiscal rule. Okay, so we have the fiscal rule, and the fiscal rule is targeting the debt. In this setup, which I gave you, okay, initial setup which I gave you, there is nothing about the changing of the debt target, nothing. Nothing about changing of the deficit target. So what this does is that it is increasing the tax rate, decreasing the tax rates here, yeah, to give us this 1.5 trillion over 10 years in today's money, yeah. But the fiscal rule is still there, and there is still instrument which attains the fiscal rule, right? And the fiscal rule basically says that the deficit is not changed because the debt target is not changed or whatever. So there is an instrument which goes actually against this, right? And this instrument is transfers. So the default calibration is that the instrument is transfers. So when we open, when you please open this Trump tax reform. Results Trump tax reform. Yeah, and let's scroll to the page number 7 because we see these instruments here. Okay, 7. So we can see that the labor and capital tax revenues to GDP are lower in the first 10 years. This is what we wanted. This is what we tuned, right? Okay, so these revenues are lower. And the tax rates are lower, okay? So look, the tariff is blue, it's not changed. The consumption tax rate is red, it didn't change. The only tax rates changed are labor and capital. So the labor tax rate went down by almost 1 percentage point, and the capital tax rate went down by 1 percentage point as well. Okay, so this is the effect of 1.5 trillion. Yeah. So the tax rates went down, the labor and capital tax revenues went down. The government deficit is 0. Look, it is doing something because because we have the target, we have the primary. Now in the model we have the primary surplus rule. Okay, primary surplus rule. Yeah. So there are some a little bit changes in the interest cost. So, but the deficit is basically 0. Deficit is 0. Yeah. And what it does is that it is using the transfers to equilibrate to maintain the 0 deficit. Yeah. You understand? So that means that the transfers need to go down as well. Yeah, because these tax rates went down. Okay, so the setup I gave you, I think it is just changing. Yeah, it is just decreasing the tax rates, and at the same time it decreases the transfers to maintain the same deficit. Okay, so these are the 2 questions you have to address. Yeah, the first is like how to spread or how to implement these lower tax revenues. Yeah, and I gave you some suggestion. You can disagree, so you can just change it. Yeah, and the second more important question is what happens with the deficit? Like what the fiscal rule if they are going to expand basically to expand the debt. Yeah. Or they just expand the debt by 2/3 of this effect, and the 1/3 will be some like taxes later or whatever. I don't know. Yeah. But now the impacts are not large. Yeah, nothing is changing much, right? So we have the GDP. The GDP increases here because of the capital income taxes, right? The decrease. So there is like people are encouraged to invest more, right? So GDP increases because of the capital. Yeah. So we are basically taxing more consumers and less the producers. Okay. Yeah, because we are lowering the capital income tax. but taking the money from the general population, like through general transfers. Yeah. So that's why the GDP increases, because we are encouraging these people to invest more. Yeah.
How the alpha is changing or
Sorry.
the alpha? So the
Alpha changes, yes, but it is not here. We don't look at it. Is it interesting for you? Or? Alpha is changing, yes. Of course, it is always changing. When something changes, alpha changes as well. Usually it changes, it is correlated with the output gap. So alpha would grow, would increase, or so no, alpha would decrease because alpha is a capital share. So alpha would decrease, yeah, here and increase here a little bit. But okay, so it doesn't do anything. Output gap is 0.05. Yeah, interest rate is the 5 basis points because there is some boom caused by investment, right? So it's a little bit, yeah, a little bit. They want to invest. There is like a hunger for investment. So the real interest rates, the underlying real interest rate goes up a little bit. Yeah. So, but this is 5 basis points. It does not do anything. Yeah. It does not do anything because gave money to producers and laborers and took it from general population, right? Through general transfers. But it is 1-to-1, the deficit didn't change. Yeah. No problem? Yeah. Okay, so now let's make a break through the 440. 440. And they are then you are basically on your own. You can change the scenario, right?